that and go to the shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West, Matt Vickers, who's been listening to all of that. Matt, what do you make of what Shabana Mahmood has said here? Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, says that it's fine, some of it anyway, some of it doesn't go far enough, and actually a lot of it won't be possible without withdrawing from the ECHR. Shabana Mahmood, we've just heard her saying that is a long, drawn-out process, would take a heck of a lot of time and would affect many, many other agreements as well. How practical are these plans?
I think, do you know what? There's small steps. There's small steps. There's lots of gimmicks in there as well. The reality is that this government's approach to immigration has been characterised by gimmicks. You know, we haven't seen much gang smashing going on, and then we had the one in, one out deal. Well, since this started on that deal, 16,500 people have come into the country, and only 99.5% of them have got to stay. It's not much of a one in, one out deal. I think there are things in here that you can welcome that are a step forward, but they're nowhere near radical enough to deal with the crisis.
What do you actually welcome? What will you work with the government on, Matt?
I think, well, we're willing to look at what we've said there. It sounds like the Labour Party are going to have problems getting this legislation through. They've already got a list sort of running up already today of people who are coming out publicly against it. And I'm sure there's lots of conversations going on behind the scenes with lots of other people. There's a few ministers on resignation watch. We've got people about to launch leadership campaigns left, right and centre in the Labour Party. So there's a big party management issue for them there. It's not I don't think there'll be a huge amount of confidence that they can actually get this through the House without the support of other parties.
So
there's big question marks around that.
Well, there may well be, but would you end up voting for something you actually don't wholly believe in, the extension of safe and legal routes, for example?
So you saw the offer there from Kemi to work with the government to look at what we can do together, where we can find common ground that works in the national interest, that we both would believe could actually help solve the problem. But the reality is, this is a huge crisis. It requires a radical response. And what we're not hearing today about those people who are arriving in the country, our approach is that if they're arriving in the country, they should not have the right to stay come what may if they arrive illegally.
But you could end up voting for a bill, and your party could end up voting for a bill that doesn't actually go as far as you want it to. Okay, it may be something in the middle, and never let the good be the enemy of the perfect necessarily, but how are you going to square that? How are you going to negotiate with the government? Are they actually going to listen to you? And what bits of this do you like and what don't you like?
I don't think we can be sure that they're going to listen, but the reality is people sat at home now are as frustrated as I am about this situation. They're frustrated by the pressure on our public services, the pressure on housing, the pressure on our public finances, and what is seen as a mickey take, the fact that people can literally rock up on our shores and expect to be put up in hotels. We need to solve this crisis. It has to be solved. It's the responsible thing to do for Kemi to offer to get around the table, have the discussion, to look at how we can take things forwards in the national interest. But the reality is, these proposals do not go far enough to solve this crisis. You need to be at the point, the only way to solve it, if you speak to the National Crime Agency, the only way to solve it is with a deterrent. The people need to think before they get in the boat that they will not be able to stay. If they think that they're going to pay people smugglers thousands of pounds to break into this country and then get sent away anywhere, they're not going to do it. They need
so
to
one of the key tenets.
Okay, we also need to make the place a lot less. It needs to not be the land of bread and honey, you know?
Well, let's get down to brass tacks here, Matt. Name me one thing that you like about this, one provision in this bill that you think you could support the government with.
So I think we are supportive of seeing extensions to the requirement for ILR to make it harder for people to gain indefinite leave to remain in this country. We welcome that as a principle. In fact, we brought forward motions on that and amendments on that to make that a longer period.
So this is the extension from 5 years to 20 years, but you still could eventually get citizenship.
Yeah, well, we're saying, so the bit of it that we're opposed to is people who arrive illegally. We're saying that for people who have arrived illegally, it should be tougher to get indefinite leave to remain. You should have been seen to have paid into the system for longer. You should have been seen to comply and contribute. But what we aren't saying is that people who arrive here illegally should get to stay, which is essentially what's being said there, that if people break into the country and make an asylum claim, that would be considered, and these people should go. The principle that we see is that if you break in, you shouldn't get to stay.
Okay.
And that is how you stop people breaking into the country. That is how you stop people coming illegally, by telling them, unless they do it in a sensible way, a legal way.
But you just said, so nobody illegally should get any indefinite leave to remain. There's no way the government is going to agree with you on that, are they?
Well, that's what we believe should happen. We believe
that's fine, but they're not going to agree with you on that.
That's what people out there want to see. It's common sense. If people know that they will not get to stay in this country, they will not get in those boats. That is the only way.
I agree with you on that point. I agree with you on that point.
The public out there, with any ounce of common sense, no, you need to stop people breaking in.
And that's fine, and I agree with you on that. But the point is, I don't think the government are going to agree with you on that, and you're going to get a hodgepodge of measures. What about these countries like Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Namibia, and visa penalties to say that people that if they don't take people back, well, then their visas will be restricted? Is that something you support?
Well, we agree with visa sanctions. It was an amendment we put forward. It's something we've talked about. In fact, we put legislation in place during the last government to create the ability to undertake visa sanctions. It is there in legislation now. There is an ability to do it. We've said that this should be part of the mix because we know that where people are sent home, for instance, the Albania deal, we know that where people were arriving, it was a huge destination, a huge place from which people were arriving. We had got a deal in place. We're sending people back, and all of a sudden, the number of people arriving fell by 93%. It's not rocket science. People, when those agreements are in place, people will stop coming. When we have a place in which to send people back to, they will stop coming. Visa sanctions are part of that deal. If countries out there aren't going to play their part, aren't going to take back criminals or people who break into our country, then there should be visa sanctions. And that's how we get these people around the table. That was a principle we put forward. That's something we've argued for. So obviously we welcome that.
If the government extends safe and legal routes, if it has additional safe and legal routes after, there are 3, I think, at the moment, Hong Kong, Ukraine, and Afghanistan. If they extend those safe and legal routes, would you vote for this legislation or not?
We are deeply... Well, you heard the questions there from Kemi. I haven't heard the answers, actually, because we haven't heard them yet, but you heard the question marks from Kemi around that. If you're creating new routes, how are you going to cap them? How are you going to make sure that the people who arrive in this country are not a security threat? You know, these are actually really big questions that are part of such a thing. The objective is
So if that's in the legislation, you won't vote for it. Is that what you're saying?
The reality is we need to reduce the number of people coming to this country. We need to be convinced that can happen. You don't need to be expanding access points and opportunities for people to come to. You need to look at how you reduce it. And at the moment, there's not that much amongst this that would make it appear that there's going to be a huge reduction. We've said...
And that's a key point of what the Home Secretary is saying. She says this whole plan will reduce illegal arrivals. Do you think that's true?
I'm not convinced that this is radical enough to make a significant dent. It might put people off. It might change the way in which people react when they get here. But actually, we know that you need a deterrent. You need people to think they can't stay before they get in the boat. If people think they can come here, it's going to be a little bit more robust, but probably they'll get through. And then in 20 years' time, they're going to carry on doing it. We need that deterrent.
What is the percentage chance you think that it's likely that the Conservatives end up voting for this legislation?
I haven't heard Shabana's response. I haven't been party to these negotiations. There's not all that much detail in the statement, so I'm not going to give you a percentage. I mean,
there's a 32-page document that no doubt you were looking at earlier on with all the provisions in it that's been out now for 3 or 4 hours. Have you not looked at that?
We've said what we will do is we'll sit down, we'll look at it, there'll be discussions. We've said we will engage the government. It's the right thing to do to try to get them to a point where we think that this thing is in the national interest. This is a crisis, but the reality is we don't think it goes far enough. It needs to be significantly more radical. It needs to be a bigger deal if it is going to put an end to this huge crisis and this huge cost to the British taxpayer.
Matt, thank you. That's Matt Vickers there, who's the Shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West. Thank you to Mike in Lincoln, who says, listening to the statement and response in Parliament, I'm reminded of 2 cats fighting in a sack over policies that the progressives in their parties won't let them get through Parliament, be it the left of Labour or the One Nation Tories. They'll block anything sensible that the electorate actually want, says Mike. Nicola in Norfolk says, the Home Secretary has just shown how nasty and petty Labour are. Kemi made a fair and reasonable response to the statement, and yet her offer to meet and work together was met with the usual, we won't take lectures for the Conservatives. I'm sick of petty party politics being put before the national interest, says Nicola. Margaret in Birmingham says, Peter, I told you, she said, we're a tolerant country. Yes, we have to, because they put migrants before the British people. She needed to say, I will detain and deport and I will stop the boats. Another gimmick and more waffle from Shabana Mahmood, says Margaret. Chris says, I feel like cheering this woman. Common sense, finally. Glenn in Colchester says, what am I missing here? There are plenty of facial recognition systems out there. You don't need to worry about change of names, etc. If these rape gangs you were talking about a bit earlier, members were in the system, it takes a second to scan their face, says Glenn in Colchester. So thank you for that. I just cannot understand the Conservatives working with Labour, says this person, when the Labour benches blocked everything the Tories wanted to bring in Rwanda and stopping migrants getting deported via the European Convention on Human Rights. Jane says the Home Secretary can't change her views that much. Does she believe it herself? Or is this just a lever to become Prime Minister? Shabana Mahmood certainly saying slightly different things to what she was saying a few years ago. In fact, diametrically opposite to what she was saying a few years ago. So very, very interesting on that side of things as well. She is still answering questions in the House of Commons. There are all sorts of MPs from all sorts of parties who are asking her lots about the detail of this plan. Well, thank you to everybody else who's been in touch on the BBC. Jane says, how many times has the BBC done this to others? Not so much recently. I've watched Parliament Channel Live, seen the news report later. Didn't match what was seen. One word can change everything. Peter in Suffolk, talking about Trump, says, whether Trump wins or not, we still have to pay our licence fee, so let him go ahead. And PG in Sunderland says, my brother, who's a staff nurse, was knocked out of bed at 4:30 a.m. by 4 police officers about his car number plate being illegal. This is after Maxie Allen, the man we spoke to earlier, who was arrested. 6 police officers came and arrested him and his partner. His children had to be looked after by someone else as they were held by police for over 12 hours. He's now being given compensation for wrongful arrest. He was complaining about his daughter's school. PG continues, the officers were in 2 marked police cars which they stopped dead in the middle of the road. Bizarrely, we have cars with no insurance dumped on our street belonging to drugs gangs, and the police are not interested in the uninsured cars, says PG in Sunderland. Well, thank you for all of that. We'll continue